Out of all the 2024 battleground states, Donald Trump is polling the best in the state of Georgia, and this really shouldn't be that surprising given the fact that in 2020, it was the closest state in the country, only being decided by about 0.2%. So Georgia being a lopsided margin for Trump in the polling averages really shouldn't come as much of a shock. Now, what is surprising, though, is that Georgia, since 2020, has consistently voted for Democratic candidates in federal races. All of these Senate races we've seen in 2020 and after have all gone to Democrats. So 2024 is the first federal election that Republicans are really leading in the state of Georgia. Obviously, statewide, Republicans did fairly well in Georgia in the midterms, despite Republicans doing poor in other parts of the country. Kemp won by a pretty decent margin, as did the other statewide Republicans. The only exception to that rule was Herschel Walker, who ended up losing by several points to Raphael Warnock. So, of course, in today's video, we're going to take a look at the polls in Georgia and analyze why the state of Georgia is so lopsided for Trump in the polling averages and why this might be a bit misleading going into the 2024 election. So we're going to get to all of that in just a second, but first, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. So Georgia is historically thought of as a Republican state. You know, barring 2020, the last time Georgia voted for a Democrat for president was in 1992 with Bill Clinton. So it's been quite literally several decades since the state of Georgia has gone blue before 2020. Now, Georgia is an immensely suburban state now, and with the population of Metro Atlanta continuing to rise, that's only going to be a bigger factor into how elections are decided here. And since the Atlanta metro area has been becoming a bigger pool of the electorate, it's been getting more Democratic, and as a result, the state as a whole has been getting more Democratic. Now, in 2016, Donald Trump had no problem winning Georgia. He won the state by around 5 points, and he did this mainly because he was able to run up large margins in Georgia's small rural counties while doing just well enough in the Atlanta metro area in order to carry the state overall by, 5 points, which is a decently comfortable margin, especially compared to how Republicans have been performing in the state as of late. Now, two counties I want to highlight, of course, are Cobb and Gwinnett counties. These are two large suburban counties just outside of Atlanta that have large populations, they have very educated populations, and they've been undergoing massive demographic change. These counties have become a lot more diverse over the past 20, 30 years, and as a result, they've become a lot more Democratic. Cobb County went to Hillary Clinton by just about 2 points, and Gwinnett County went to Hillary Clinton by almost 6. Now, at the time, these margins were pretty impressive for Hillary Clinton. These counties hadn't gone blue in decades in a statewide or federal race. And then, of course, you go to the 2020 election where you have Donald Trump lose Gwinnett County by 18 points and lose Cobb by 14. So a massive, massive shift from 2016, Cobb County swinging 12 points to the left, Gwinnett County swinging 12 points to the left. It's very clear that Republicans have struggled massively in these two counties, and that really has swung the entire state over to the left. Obviously, there's also been a swing in Fulton County, Joe Biden getting nearly 73% of the vote here. There was about a 5-point swing in Fulton County, but the state of Georgia would not have gone blue in 2020 if you hadn't seen massive shifts in the counties surrounding Atlanta. Because again, these counties are becoming a larger percentage of the population, and they're getting more blue. Now, Donald Trump is up in Georgia, according to the polls, by around 6 points on average, and he's been leading in the state in every single poll conducted since May of last year. So, if the polls are to be believed, Donald Trump is the clear favorite here in the state of Georgia, and obviously, as we've learned over the past many cycles, and really throughout politics entirely, polls are certainly not gospel, and they're not 100% accurate. Georgia in recent years has sort of bucked this trend because in 2022, the polls were fairly accurate in the Senate race and the governor's race. In 2020, they were very accurate in the presidential race. Georgia polls have been somewhat very reliable. So the fact that Donald Trump is up by 6 points in Georgia is pretty interesting because you wouldn't expect somebody like Trump to be up 6 points in a state like Georgia with all the things we've just talked about, massive demographic change, a large exodus of white college-educated voters leaving the Republican Party, a more diversifying state. You would think that this state, at a minimum, would be a lot closer, but it's actually the most lopsided of all the swing states that are really going to decide this election. Now, I'm a bit skeptical of these polls. Obviously, it's March. I have still a pretty long way until the election in November, but the fact that Donald Trump is winning this state by as much in the polls should be pretty concerning to Joe Biden, considering the fact that Georgia has been seen in recent years as a pretty exciting prospect for Democrats because they already have 2 senators from the state. And if they were to win control of the legislature and, of course, the governor's mansion, they would probably solidify Georgia as a blue state and not a purple state. But I think, obviously, Biden's immense weakness on the national stage is really proving to be very challenging for Democrats. Again, even in a state that demographically is very much in their favor. But I find it hard to believe that Donald Trump would win the state of Georgia by 6 points. If we take a look at 2022, for example, Brian Kemp ended up winning the state of Georgia by around 7 points. And that was mainly because of his impressive showing in the Atlanta metro area relative to how Republicans have been conventionally performing there. He got pretty close in Cobb County, only losing it by around 5 points. And of course, Gwinnett County, he only lost by 11, which again, only lost by 11 seems obviously like a lot, but compared to Donald Trump losing it by 18 and losing Cobb by 14, they're pretty impressive margins. Now, these counties swinging to the right obviously contributed to Brian Kemp's margin of victory, but the ex-urban counties are the areas where he improved the most. Places like Hall County, Forsyth County, Cherokee County. These are the counties where Brian Kemp overperformed the most out of all of the counties in the state. And these ex-urban counties also have pretty large populations as well, and they have been trending towards the left. But if there's any counties that Donald Trump could potentially start to win back some voters, it would be in these more ex-urban counties that are less diverse, and they're still a lot more Republican friendly than obviously Fulton County, Gwinnett, Cobb, etc. But I still think it's going to be a massive demographic hurdle to overcome. I think something that could obviously play in the Republicans' favor is if black turnout is down in Georgia. That will obviously indicate more of a Republican advantage. But this was a state that was razor thin in 2020, and with Joe Biden being 16 points underwater, it just makes sense that as of right now he's polling pretty poorly in Georgia. But I would be very, very shocked and surprised if Donald Trump actually won Georgia by 6 points on election day. I don't doubt that he's probably leading in the state as of right now, but I think it will still be a very tough state to win overall just because the Atlanta metro area is such a large part of the state's population now. And Republicans have been losing ground, and not just here, but also the ex-urban counties as well. So if they want any hope of winning the state in 2020, they have to improve in these ex-urban counties, and they have to continue to run up massive margins in North and South Georgia in order to basically make up for the poor performances they're going to get in the metro area, which really doesn't seem like it's coming back to the GOP anytime soon. Again, the demographics just make it nearly impossible for Republicans to do well in this part of the state. And overall, if these trends continue over the next 10 years, the state of Georgia will be essentially unwinnable for the GOP. So I think it's only natural to be somewhat skeptical of a 6-point lead in the state of Georgia overall in the aggregate. I think these polls are going to narrow up as we get closer to the election. We're already starting to see national polls narrowing up. And in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Joe Biden is up in the RCP average in these states, despite the fact that he's super unpopular. So there is something to be said, as I've talked about on this channel many, many times, that Biden is just very lucky in the fact that he's running against Donald Trump and not some just no-name Republican. Because I think if there was a no-name Republican versus Joe Biden, this election wouldn't even be that close. I think that Republican would win fairly easily. You know, Georgia, Arizona would be essentially en bloc. And all they'd really need to do is win Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, and they would win the White House. They wouldn't need Michigan. They wouldn't need Pennsylvania. Those are states that are more democratically friendly, obviously. They would just need Wisconsin. And I think a generic Republican with Biden being so unpopular could potentially pull that off. But, you know, the GOP has Donald Trump as its presumptive nominee. Joe Biden's the presumptive Democratic nominee. So we're basically stuck with a rematch between these two candidates once more. And I think as of right now, while I still think Joe Biden has the edge in the long term, I think short term, Donald Trump is doing very well in a number of these states and nationally, and that should be a huge concern to Joe Biden going forward, especially as there really seems to be no sign of the economy or the international situation getting any better from now until the election. But anyway, that's it for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos I put out. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.